How to Read the Quran by Carl W Ernst. Introduction. The problem of reading the Quran. Obstacles to reading the Quran. The genesis of this book comes from a simple question. How should non-Muslims read the Quran? On a level, this would seem to be a relatively straightforward issue. The Quran is a sacred text, comparable to the Bible and the scriptures of other religious traditions, which are often read and studied in an academic and literary context. From that point of view, the questions might seem to be primarily technical. How is the text organized? What are its primary features? And what is its audience and principal interpretative traditions? Surely, the Quran should be approached like any other text. But with the Quran, the situation is different. The Quran is the source of enormous anxiety in Europe and America for both religious conservatives who are alarmed about a competitive post-biblical revelation and secularists who view Islam with deep suspicion as an irrational force in the post-Enlightenment world. Neither of those worldviews take the Quran very seriously as a text. According to these views, it is instead a very dangerous problem. It is even the case that a number of attempts have been made to outlaw the sale and distribution of the Quran completely as a text that promotes violence, an argument made by fundamentalists in India during the 1980s and more recently by a right-wing anti-immigration party in the Netherlands. In 2002, outside religious groups sued the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for violating the freedom of religion when it assigned a translation of selections from the Quran as its summer reading program for all incoming students that year. In 2010, an obscure Christian pastor in Florida drew worldwide attention when he threatened to burn copies of the Quran, claiming that it was the cause of the terrorist attacks against American targets in September 2001. These are only a few manifestations of contemporary nervousness about reading the Quran. I would argue that such an attitude of suspicion is hardly conducive to a fair-minded understanding of the text. Hostile readers of the Quran use a literary approach, that is, the equivalent of a blunt instrument. They make no attempt to understand the text as a whole. Instead, they take individual verses out of context, give them the most extreme interpretation possible, and implicitly claim that over 1 billion Muslims around the world robotically adhere to these extremist views without exception. This is in effect a conspiracy theory that has virally multiplied in significant sectors of modern Euro-American history. It is irrational, it is paranoid, and it is out of touch with the realities of the lives of most Muslims around the world today. It ignores the existence of multiple traditions of interpreting the Quran in a very different fashion. Unfortunately, a small minority of extremists who quote the Quran in support of terrorist violence have been magnified by the media into a spectre that is now haunting Europe and the United States more intensely than Marxism ever did. In part because of these contemporary anxieties, it is difficult for most Europeans and Americans to read the Quran. What is the Quran actually? The historical evidence regarding the origin of the Quran is discussed in great detail in chapter 1, but a brief summary is offered here for those who are unfamiliar with the text. The Quran, the title, literally means recitation, oldest spelling Quran is no longer used by scholars, can be described as a book in the Arabic language that is divided into 114 chapters known as surahs.